going to kick this off because we've got some great speakers. I'm going to try to move through this quickly with a Robert H. Jackson case, actually, known as the Forbes dairy case here in Jamestown. And I'm going to just briefly go through what this case is. It was an early case. He was 30 years old when he tried it. And as you'll see as I go through, it has a lot to do with today's topic. So here's a really quick timeline of this case. 1895, the city of Jamestown extended their sewer out to a creek, Cassadaga Creek, and had it deposit raw sewage right before where the Forbes dairy was. And of course, the dairy bordered this creek. The cows drank from it. In 1923, we're jumping forward, Jamestown now has a population of 40,000 residents. Okay, so for 40,000 people, all that sewage, untreated, is being dumped into Cassadaga Creek. It's also an exceptionally dry year. In June of 1923, there's a typhoid epidemic that breaks out. And tracing where the sick illnesses occur, very quickly it's identified that it's the route of the Forbes dairy. November 1923, so several months later, Forbes hires young Robert Jackson to sue the city of Jamestown, and I'll tell you why they felt the need to do that in a bit. Very quickly, they hire him in May 1923, November 1923. In May of 1924, there is the conclusion of the first trial. The verdict is for the Forbes, and there are several, sort of a tortured appeals process, and there's an appeal, which is also won. So May 1925, the second trial, again, verdict for the Forbes. After that, the floodgates open, and several towns and individuals come forward and sue the city of Jamestown. And then some years later, after that, Jamestown does finally build a sewage treatment plant. So they're not dumping raw waste. And I would like to say that a lot of the facts here I have gotten from an excellent white paper written by Mary D. Martucci. Tell me when I get these wrong. Okay, so the Forbes dairy, just to paint the picture, it's Grant Forbes and his son Merle. Together they have 164 acres along the banks of the Cassadaga. Merle's wife, Ida, is bedridden as she's pregnant. This is important coming up, and delivers her baby 1 month after the outbreak. So after the Forbes dairy was identified, the city of Jamestown directed them to stop selling milk, to personally cease contact with the dairy operation, and to begin to pasteurize. So they were not pasteurizing at the time. This was a big case. People died, and the Forbes were very publicly identified, so they really had considerable damage to their reputation. Okay, and just incidentally, it was 1947 that the first state required pasteurization. So we're in the 20s. We're 20-some years before that. This was not an extraordinary thing that they weren't pasteurizing. So let's just paint the picture of Cassadaga Creek and typhoid. So what you see there, that is human feces. It was just floating, and one of they had several expert witnesses and others who testified as to the nature of the creek. And one gentleman from Kyantone, this is the quote, "Fecal matter from the city of Jamestown would gather itself in bunches. There were spots near the Forbes farm, 16 feet in length by 2 to 10 feet in width of nothing but human manure, in which you could put a stick down 3 feet. The odor was abhorrent, the flies were thick." Okay, so we'll get by that now. I painted that picture. A couple of facts about typhoid. It thrives in milk. The bacteria thrives in milk. However, when a cow drinks from a contaminated source, the stomach and the processes is such that it is not transmitted through the milk. So that sort of obvious pathway was not available. It was known that was not how the typhoid got in the milk. And then one aspect of this is that Ida, bedridden at 8 months pregnant, was identified as a carrier. They did a ton of testing, sending it up to multiple labs in Buffalo and down to DC. She's a carrier because she, as a nurse, did work caring for typhoid patients 1917 to 1920. Okay, so at the trials, there are 3 main areas of contention here. One is the condition of the creek. How bad was it? Well, as you can see, Jackson did a tremendous amount of documentation and proved without a doubt that it was in horrible condition. The cause of the epidemic, was it the feces in the creek or was it Ida? And then what were the damages to the dairy? So Jamestown, needless to say, said the source of contamination was Ida Forbes and poor hygiene at the dairy. Now the Forbes ran quite a professional sort of operation at the time, but anyhow, so this was the Jamestown's case. The Forbes said that it was the dumping of the raw sewage that caused damage. How the pathway got there, no one really knows. Ida was dismissed as a carrier because, being bedridden, she did not have any contact with the milk at that time, at the time of the outbreak. So we're left to wonder how it was. It could be that it got on the cow's udders and it wasn't completely cleaned, but that would be a standard of care sort of beyond the normal. It could have even been flies, which really are hard to contain in a dairy operation. So Jackson won both trials and secured a modest judgment, which you can, there are probably a lot of reasons for that, but the Forbes did regain their reputation and have some compensation for their losses. I want to leave you with some, and I'm sure that Professor Shelley will show you others, but as we go through this, you can be sort of mulling. But if you think about this purely in financial terms, I mean, we don't look at the distress, we don't look at the suffering. For the typhoid outbreak, there were 35 people made very sick by this. 2 died. So how are you going to sort of assess what that cost is? You have insurance actuarial tables, loss of income, cost of and to caregivers, hospital medical costs, and it goes on. You had the initial investigation by the staff. You had the loss already described by the Forbes. You had 2 trials and 2 trips to the appellate division. So for both sides, you have attorneys and staff fees. for the trial with preparation and exhibits, expert witnesses that had to come in 3 times. They came in from Chicago. At this point, this is like a 2-day trip each way, so you're paying somebody for like a week. So they brought in experts from Boston and New York and Chicago, and you're paying their travel expenses. The judge and the staff, and the cost to the juries. So, and then you have the subsequent lawsuits and all of that cost versus the sewage treatment plant cost and operation of the construction and operation cost. So, just leave you with that thought.